Here's where is an interesting question, because I know your reputation as being a sort of this young, rising maverick, such a maverick even among conservatives that if memory serves me right, sir, you had supported Barack Obama to be president. Not that you could vote in the election, but what was your argument for Barack Obama over John McCain? If you now know that, and he didn't exactly hide this, that he would be quite a big spender.
Yeah, you're making sure I'm never going to be asked back onto Fox News. I'll tell you what the argument was. The argument was, and I kind of still think this, and it's maybe something that you see a bit more clearly from abroad. It's a really unfair thing that this should be so, but the fact of the matter is that the election of a mixed-race candidate who had opposed the Iraq War from the beginning was going to make your country a lot more trusted and popular and therefore authoritative around the world. And you know, that's happened. But you're right. I mean, we've paid a price for that. You've paid a price for it. The only thing I'd kind of say in his defense is I think the Republican Party didn't exactly have a brilliant record on this. And one of the reasons why I wasn't wild about the McCain campaign, even though I'm more loyal generally to the Republican Party, more uncomplicatedly loyal, shall we say, than I am to my own, is that I think the GOP had drifted away in the Bush years from what ought to have been its core principles. It had become the party of federal deficits, it had become the party of big spending, it had become the party of trampling over states' rights, particularly on the gay marriage amendment, and it had become the party of external protectionism with the steel tariffs. And then, of course, latterly it became the party of nationalizations and bailouts with the first of the bailout packages. Now, okay, here's an argument for Obama that maybe will go down a little bit better with some of your viewers. He has already united the Republicans around a more sensible economic policy.
Well, let me ask you about his policy. Let me ask you then about...
Voted for the Bush bailout, right, but they opposed his.
Very good point. But let me ask you now about his policies. He is going to be going to your country. I know you're in France right now, but he's going to be going to your country to say, we together have to address what is this global crisis. And it's pitching your prime minister against the likes of Angela Merkel in Germany, who does not share that. In fact, she has said that if governments spend willy-nilly, it can lead to hyperinflation, and if her memory serves her right, the last time that happened in Germany, a guy with a mustache took over. And she doesn't want to go back there.
Yeah.
But that's the great divide, and I'm wondering whether it's going to be a real tense meeting next week. What do you suspect?
I mean, you're right. Obama and Brown are pushing for an especially bad policy. Let's not let the others off the hook. I mean, all the governments have been doing this stimulus, bailout, spend your way out of recession. So okay, they are at an extreme end of a bad policy, but they're not alone in it. And the French and the German governments have their own bad solution, which is more regulation of the markets, which is going to make it even harder to kind of crawl our way out of this place. You would be amazed how much potency the name Obama still has abroad. The big argument that Brown is using is, look, I can't be making a terrible mistake here because Obama is doing the same thing. And that's like a kind of magic amulet that wards off any criticism. But of course, you know, the policy is going to catch up with him. And with us.
And you think the cure is going to be worse than the disease? And what you articulate, if we could show some of your remarks back in this country, we want to just show you addressing this group. What galvanized people's attention from this meeting is that a lot of them said, Mr. Hannan, fairly or not, a star was born. And they said that you have spoken for a movement that has been sort of blindsided. Now, whether that's fair or not, I don't know. I don't want to puff your ego up. You seem like a pretty stable, rational, level-headed guy. But that they said, we're looking at the next prime minister. What did you think of that buzz, that YouTube sensation your remarks created?
It's really flattering. I don't think I'm ever going to be a prime minister. And one of the reasons why is because I think that governments shouldn't do things. You know, I tell you, you said I supported Obama.
You got to whisper that. See, Mr. Hannan, you got to whisper that. Very few politicians think government shouldn't do things. That gets to be dangerous.
But, right. The guy I would have really voted for, had he been a candidate, the guy I'd have really voted for in your election is Ron Paul. I like his interpretation of the Constitution. I like his view on fiscal policy. McCain had done a number of things that annoyed me, not least his support for closer European integration. But, you know, I don't have a vote in your country. It's not for me to say these things. But, you know, it is so hard for a politician to say, I don't know. You know, there's no answer to this. Over to you guys. And that's kind of partly a media thing. It's partly a modern expectation thing. But I heard a really interesting story from a guy who was a minister in New Zealand when they had a banking crisis. It was when they'd taken away the subsidies from their farmers. The land prices collapsed. Farmers were in negative equity. The bankers came to the government and said, we need a bailout. If we don't get a bailout, there's going to be a meltdown. And the New Zealand government said, you know what, guys? That's your problem. And you know what happened? The banks went away and said, yeah, this is our problem. We'd better sort this out. And so they rescheduled the mortgage payments. They gave people interest-only options and this kind of thing. Within 3 years, land prices had recovered. No crisis. Now, here's the real point. If the government had given in and had the bailout that the banks were asking for, it would have almost certainly triggered precisely the kind of crisis that they were aiming to avoid. And so it's a tough argument to make.
Well, you know, when we say in this country, Mr. Hannan...
Nothing at all.
All right, I apologize. I know there's this delay here, and I apologize for that. But there's an argument in this country that New York is not New Zealand, that when a U.S. bank is on the verge of collapsing or falling, we have to do something. That's been the argument of both the last Republican administration and this one. If you were a leader, either there or here, in the same situation, would you have said, let them rip?
Yes, I would. I mean, the trouble is that both of your parties, like both of ours, were allowing their policy to be written by bankers who are not disinterested in this. And don't make the mistake that a lot of people on the left make of thinking that financiers are kind of for free trade. They're really not. All financiers are monopolists. All financiers will grab a subsidy if they can. Every big businessman left to himself is a corporatist. And the beauty of the capitalist system is it doesn't let them indulge that instinct. Or at least it didn't until the last 6 months, when we've suddenly turned the clock back to this kind of this economic consensus that prevailed between the 1930s and the 1970s with disastrous consequences.
Mr. Hannan, thank you very, very much. We're all going to be watching you a lot more closely than we have in the past. I don't know if that's good or bad, but, sir, very good to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. It's a pleasure.
Daniel Hannan, watching closely.